talk to you a little bit about a subject that I'm well versed in. At least I would think so. And that subject is unconscious bias. I've seen it thrown around a lot, and eventually I'll probably get into it when I finally start the critical race theory deconstruction of their wonderful manual on how to be a racist. But I figured I'd hit this subject, and I think I'll hit it hard because I talked about it once before. But it's time to bring it up again because there's a lot of people talking about critical race theory and this unconscious bias training that's being required across every freaking organization. How Trump's removing it from the federal government and their requirements and all that fun stuff. Well, let me cover one important thing right off the bat because I think it's quite important. Implicit bias training doesn't work, according to the science. Guess why it doesn't work? Their science is based off of critical theory. Critical theory placed in sociology specifically. So these people that develop this stuff in sociology happen to also be critical race theorists or critical gender theorists or lobotomized morons from planet Zarbo, as I like to put it. So in Bloomberg, no less, that's a great thing, you go down here and you read, I didn't even have to go past the first couple paragraphs. From Google, Papa John's to Buffalo Wings and Starbucks, more companies have introduced implicit bias training. They do implicit and not unconscious anymore for a very specific reason. It's because implicit requires the conscious mind, and it is implied that you're being biased by their interpretation of reality, critical race theory. So it's implied that you're being racist, essentially. These HR-sponsored courses are intended to foster diversity and inclusion by making employees more aware of unconsciously believed negative stereotypes. The unconscious mind does not believe shit, and I'll get to that in a second. And yet, despite these growing adoption of unconscious bias trainings, there has been no convincing scientific evidence that it works. In fact, much of the academic evidence on implicit bias intervention highlights their weakness as a method, and I'm going to get to that one, their possibility of boosting diversity and inclusion, and instructions to suppress stereotypes have often had the opposite effect. What happens when you ignore a thing? Does it go away? No, not really. But when you point a thing out to somebody, does it become consciously aware in their mind repeatedly until the point that they're just annoyed by its very existence? Let me give you an example. One of the guys I talked to on Discord notices when people smack their lips. He notices Tim Pool smacks his lips quite a bit, and he has the stereotype that anybody that smacks their lips is kind of pretentious, maybe stuck up, kind of have a stick up their ass or something. So, when you hear that, every single time I hear it now, I think of what he said. Another example is something my choir teacher told me over 20 years ago, and it still gets on my fucking nerves. And that's when a singer will be singing something out of their song, right? And lyrics. And let's give you an example. I want you.
Do you think that I could kiss you?
Stop that or I'll get annoyed.
Okay. I want you. You notice that I cut off the T there because my choir director teacher back in high school told me either you pronounce it explicitly, make it covenant, and put a break in there so you separate the two words, or just skip that freaking letter altogether because it makes a different word when you put it into lyrics and singing. And sometimes when you put the notes together and all that shit, it kind of flows melodically and you'll carry it out and try to connect the notes, and it sounds really good. So there's a Nine Inch Nails lyric that I often cite, and it's, I want you. And yeah, instead of say I want you, which you can hear, it's now I want you. So it sounds like I want you. Why would you want you? That makes no goddamn sense. So every time, and your thank you, you're welcome, by the way. Every time you hear somebody singing, you're going to capture that in your head at this point in time. And from here on out, as a lesson, you'll now notice that particular instance happening in all pop music everywhere, where they just bleed the words together.
My friend, stop all this talk. Teach him a lesson.
Her intention was to make sure that you don't do that. Well, now you notice it everywhere, so it gets really annoying, and you don't do that. Well, in diversity training, they're trying to teach you not to do something. And now that you noticed everything is racist, you become overly racist instead. Because now it's apologetics, it's, oh, I'm so sorry for being racially insensitive, and a bunch of other shit. And all this person has to do is claim that it's racially insensitive, whether it is or not.
What do you have to say?
The unconscious has a ton of operations in your brain. I'm going to link to this in the description, but a lot of our thinking happens on an unconscious level. However, the operations are not conscious. You don't know about them. Meaning biases, which is a deliberate, rationed thought between two things, your bias over one thing over another, it may be rooted in the unconscious, but it is now implicit. So that's why they've switched from unconscious bias, because they weren't able to prove that shit, to implicit bias, which means it's informed by your unconscious, and you make it into an actionable thing. Much of human motivation and interpersonal attraction is shaped by unconscious awareness. What type of girl or guy are you attracted to? Can you tell me why? You probably can't. It's all because I find those things attractive. What motivates you to get up in the morning and do whatever? Do you enjoy your job? Is it the thing that you're doing that you enjoy? Or are you missing out on something? That's a good question now, isn't it? What motivates you? Do you even know why? Why do you like doing that thing where other people's don't? For example, I got friends that work on cars. I don't particularly enjoy working on cars. In fact, I hate it. When I have to do work on my own car, I kind of try to avoid it, to be honest. Why would I want to go do that shit? Well, the unconscious mind is difficult to measure. They know it exists. It even has fleeting perceptions, but it's too swift to measure on the conscious level. It leaves imprints. You can have, the consciousness requires attention, right? You know things are happening. But it also can register when you're not paying attention. Can it not? You're lost in thought and somebody, oh, I was supposed to be paying attention there. But the unconscious mind is auditory. It's automatic. Everything just goes flashing. It ties your memories, your dreams, your fantasies. All of it kind of triggers together. So ADHD people are probably really familiar with this because our brain's switching constantly between different subjects, which is one of the reasons I go on tangents all the goddamn time. But it connects dots, it connects patterns. Conspiracy theorists probably have a really active unconscious mind because they have passions about these different subjects. So what they do is they connect the dots rationally, or irrationally in some cases, in a lot of cases actually, and morph it into something that is kind of fantasy, but they've rationalized that fantasy into reality. So as far as they know, it does the lion's share of the brain works, but they don't know exactly how all of it gets done. And it's constantly studied. It's a very unknown thing in psychology and neuroscience and even sociology, except for sociology's taken over by social justice warrior retards. One area of research, main area of research, is how emotions take shape, because apparently your emotional reaction to things is the primary function, at least from what I can tell, of the unconscious mind. Your flight or fight response, for example, is an unconscious choice. And most people rationalize why they acted the way they did after your unconscious mind's already reacted. It's done. You've made that decision unconsciously, automatically, but you don't know why. So your conscious mind rationalizes your unconscious already made decision. And it could be informed by prejudice. It could be informed by all sorts of stuff. Maybe you had a bad experience with minorities at one point in time. So you rationalize future behaviors based on that singular bad experience. Unless, of course, you can rationalize the position that it's only that individual person that gave you problem and not a swath of minorities. Like you just blanket statement that group. If you think in groupthink, that's what's going to happen. And a lot of people are tribal. They think in groupthink. Individual thought is actually kind of abnormal for people. Most people think in tribes and groups. We're a social species.
To understand what I mean, just hear what I say.
There was two ways that I tried to explain this, and I found that one way is not working very well. And that is you have two glasses in front of you. One you drink from, and you've now claimed it in your head. In your head, that is yours. It is now your property. You drank from it. You spit in it, whatever. Another person reaches for your drink. What is your response? And I've heard somebody say it's a social faux pas. You can't do that. It doesn't work that way. But in other groups, in other nationality, in other cultural heritages, it's fine. They don't care. Well, that's a difference in culture. So you're going to see a different response depending on where those people are from. More highly dense and more restricted the resource of water is, the more or less likely somebody's going to be to share a cup. But more likely, if there's two cups, they'll always separate those two so that one person owns one and the other person owns the other. That operation of ownership, connecting your mind to that thing, saying this is mine and I'm going to use it, is the unconscious bias. Listen to me. It is the unconscious mind connecting objects of ownership to things. It is now mine. Not the groups, it's mine, because there's more than one and there's enough to go around. I don't have to share, it's mine. That is a form of unconscious bias. You're biased toward that one cup because you drank from it and that's your thing. How you rationalize that, irrelevant. And I've noticed that this kind of description, in particular, when I described it to other people, didn't work very well. So I think I found another method to describe unconscious bias in a way that will make more sense to a lot more people. And so far it's worked. So I'm going to have you try this. And it's for those people that think unconscious bias is a thing and everybody should check their original sin and go to hell if you think otherwise. Which is fun because the unconscious mind is a demonstration of evolution, but they believe in the blank slate. So clearly they think the unconscious mind is programmed, but intuition and instinct and all that other stuff that is automatic within your brain is the unconscious mind. As far as evolutionary psychology goes, that's what it is. Blank slate says, oh, you were socially programmed to be that way, and that's why your brain is that way. So we're all programmed to be racist at one point in time. Makes no goddamn sense. Anyways, I digress. Let's get on to the analogy. Everyone is familiar with the needs of the many, needs of the one moral dilemma. The best way it's described is there's railroad tracks, and there's a switch, and you're on the control lever for the switch. One side has 10 people, another side has one person. Now, 80 to 90% of the people will kill the one person to save the 10 people. That is a moral rationalization of the needs of the many versus the needs of the one, right? Those 10 people are going to die, or those 10 people will survive, and that one person will die. There's no way to stop it, but you saved 10 people. Now, here's how That is a normal rational position. That is an instinctual thing. That is an unconscious decision in a sense, because what you're putting yourself in the position of 10 random people versus one random person. Social evolutionary theory would state that you would save the 10 people because you're most likely to survive as a herd, as a social species, with 10 versus 1. However, and this is where the unconscious mind plays a little switcheroo in your little brain, that one person is someone special. Think of a loved one. Think of the person that you most value in your life. Be it your dog, your cat, your mother, your father, your husband, your wife, your children, your child. Maybe it's a random child and you're just very attached to children. Not in the cuties way, but in the I think babies are cute way. However you want to frame it. The person that's on the singular track is the person that you love the most. Would you switch that switch? A rational mind would still say, yes, I'm sorry they have to go, but I saved 10 people. They would understand. They would rationalize that decision if that person wasn't very valuable, or as valuable as they think they were. And your unconscious mind actually connects all the good and bad that person has done to you over the years that you've known them, or a dog or whatever. They connect all the good and bad simultaneously in your head, all memories, all reflexes, all emotions, all everything, to help you rationalize and understand the decision you have to make right then and there. You only have a second to make that switch in order for one person to survive or the other. However, if you replace the person from a random unknown and put somebody that you could not live life without, you'll more than likely kill the 10 people to save the person you love. And you would hate yourself for it, because now you've had to rationalize killing 10 people to save the one. Why would you do that? That is your unconscious mind working overtime. You have to now, because the weight of that one individual person is more than the 10 people you just murdered or killed, or however you want to put it. Since you're the one that had control of the switch, you're the one that had control over these people's lives. And now that I've explained that moral dilemma to ad infinitum, you can understand how the unconscious mind works. Because the unconscious mind is doing moral decision making. The unconscious mind is taking all your predispositions, your memories, your fantasies, the way you like to live, the things you grew up doing, and taking your base emotional, irrational, subconscious, unconscious thinking, if you want to call it that. Biases is a little bit more accurate because it's instinctual. It doesn't actually think. It's irrational by its very nature, as far as I'm concerned, as far as we can tell. It's not a rational thinking thing, but it does connect everything all together so your rational mind eventually catches up, but it's already fed all this information by the unconscious mind. So that moral dilemma, depending on how a person would choose, you ask them why. Why would you suddenly kill 10 people versus the one person? Well, I couldn't live without them. Or vice versa. They justify killing the person they love, saying something like, they would understand that I had to save these 10 people, and I would miss them dearly. It would be a horrible situation, but I saved 10 lives. They would have to justify the loss of love and life with saving 10 people, or they justify saving the person they love and letting these other people die. And we see this moral dilemma in movies all the time, where somebody decides whether they're going to save the one person or all of them. Sometimes you'll see them, they run back into the thing, and if they don't get back to the switch real quick, it's saving the life of the crew versus saving this one person. I was reminded of this. I'm watching the old Star Trek movies, and it's The Wrath of Khan, the second movie, where the needs of the one outweighed the needs of the many. But then the next movie, they reverse it. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. So their entire crew got together and risked life, limb, exile, execution, all that shit to save Spock. Both sides are morally accurate, depending on the value of the individual versus the value of the group. That value is irrational. It's not made anywhere. And so, I think, in my opinion, this demonstrates how unconscious bias training, as I try to carry it back to the original subject, that the unconscious bias training that they try to put forth is based on non-scientific methods. They're trying to base this thought that we're all racist by nature on the assumption that you program the unconscious mind to do things. Your unconscious mind doesn't retain any of this. It doesn't. Your thoughts, it's all in your brain, right? Your fantasies, your memories, all that stuff. Your rational mind sets forth the parameters. Your memories, your values, set forth the restrictions, limitations, and or benefits. So all of it put together would demonstrate that the unconscious bias training simply isn't going to work. When you take people that already do not value race, and then you force them to value race, they're not going to value anybody else's race but their own, instinctively. Because they're already the race. Why would they? So the only true option to this unconscious bias training shit is to teach people that race has no value. None. If you can implant that into their head, then race becomes a null issue. Unconscious bias training suddenly works. But unfortunately for these idiots, they do the opposite. They try to teach everybody that race has value. No, it doesn't. It does not. If you insist that race has value, I must insist that you're a racist at that point. But I digress. That is a subject for another time. Hopefully that subject comes up in this great and wondrous book of critical race theory. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I broke down unconscious bias somewhat for you in some ways to understand. I'm going to leave the links in the description of my sources so that you can see them and read along and understand. And I just lip smacked for my good friend that hates that oh so much. I hope to see you next time.